There is a startup founded by 3 Albanians in Vienna that has raised over $3.6 million in pre-seed funding. It reached 60,000 users while still in beta, and in just 2 weeks generated over 500,000 AI credits from users on their platform. All of this founded by 3 Albanians in Vienna, who formalized their partnership by signing their names on a handmade chessboard, and built software that some of the most prominent architects are using today. That company is Synaps, one of the most credible architecture softwares ever built by the Albanian diaspora. But here is what makes it interesting. Because how do you implement AI into an industry that is the second largest in the world by total value, with the second least digitized economic sector in existence? The real question is whether architecture, the industry that has resisted every wave of new technology for decades, is actually ready to let artificial intelligence in. Because the tools that win in slow-moving professional industries are rarely the ones with the best features. They are normally the ones that make a skeptical industry feel safe enough to change. Because the thing that I keep on noticing about Albanian and diaspora technology companies is that they're often technically ahead of where the market expects them to be, but strategically behind on how to get that market to move. The gap between what you have built and how the industry adopts it is where most prominent companies stalled before they should. Because Synaps proves the story of Albanians building serious technology for the world. But how does an industry as slow-moving and trust-dependent as architecture actually change? And whether Synaps is positioned to work inside it. And by the end of this video, you understand exactly what that adoption war looks like for Synaps and what I would do about it. What is the origin story behind one of the Albanian diaspora's most ambitious software startups, Synaps? It is 2021 and Kevin Cobaj has been living in Vienna since 2013. Whilst talking with a group of friends in his bar about investments in real estate, Agron Bajraktari walks in. Agron has spent the previous 7.5 years inside the cybersecurity group at the Austrian Institute of Technology. Agron and Kevin start a conversation that may have led to nothing, but they decide to formalize a partnership there and then by signing their names and the day on a handmade chessboard. And that physical act was the beginning of their startup journey. But they needed a third, and they found Brendon Ahmeti, who brought something the other two couldn't offer, which was design instinct and product vision. Kevin was commercial, Agron was technical. Brendon was a person who could look at a product from the outside and shape how it felt. And rather than running a standard executive structure where one of them makes the calls, they chose unanimous decision making. Every major choice required all 3 of them to agree. It may have slowed things down, but it meant that nobody could be overruled. And that governance decision may be the reason the product held together long enough to reach launch. In November 2025, instead of debuting it in Vienna, the city that they had built everything, they chose Tirana. They launched in front of some of the world's leading architects and the Albanian Prime Minister. And that gave a statement about what this company is and where it belongs. The lesson in the origin is that Synaps was built on deliberate decisions. And those decisions compounded into something that Silicon Valley eventually funded. Let me break down Synaps' business model, as it's not what most people think it is. Most people will look at Synaps and see it as an AutoCAD alternative, but that's not necessarily what they've built. What they built is a single, cloud-native environment that collapses a fragmented architectural workflow into one browser tab. The first layer is the canvas. You open your browser and the entire design environment is live. No downloads, local compute, or waiting for files to sync. Because what Autodesk built for the desktop era, Synaps rebuilt for the collaborative era. And what Synaps got right that AutoCAD never resolved was that multiplayer was not added as a feature, but built into the foundation. The whole canvas is designed for teams to work together in the same space, in the same time, on the same projects. The second layer is Vetsi AI. And this is an engine that does the work architects spend most of the time doing manually. You can describe your space in text, and Vetsi AI generates your floor plan as a vector layout. And it's not just a flat image. You have freedom to edit the walls, doors, and floors, which allows for these structures to be something you can continue to work with. The company states that this reduces manual drafting commands by 80% and draws 50 times faster than traditional CAD in internal testings. Synaps is representing a change in how early stage designs feel, because they know that most AI tools have missed that architectures don't need pixels. It needs parametric objects, things you can change without starting over. The third layer is the rendering engine. Synaps can take a vector layout and produce a photorealistic 3D scene, a 2D plan, and a video rendered in under 10 seconds. The industry standard for the same amount of work is usually hours or even days. And the company calls this workflow vibe designing, allowing to explore design options with clients in real time without going back to the studio, which changes the aspect of what a client meeting can feel like. But making the industry adopt these features is exactly where the tension lives. Here is the exact reason that Synaps may not be able to cross a bridge from impressive demo to deep professional adoption. Because the problem is not with the technology and it's not with the product. It's a positioning problem that creates a trust gap gap that the product alone cannot close. Because Autodesk's AutoCAD family generates over $1.79 billion a year. But the industry is the second least digitized economic sector in the world. And that's not because architects are slow. It is that the cost of getting a drawing wrong is a collapsed building or failed planning application. Trust in software here is not a preference. It's a professional liability question. Because Synaps has been framed in the press as an AutoCAD killer. Quoted as, if Figma and Lovable had a baby and that baby was an architect. And that is definitely a great headline, but it's a very tough positioning strategy, especially for selling in a profession where the industry has used the same tools for the last 15 to 20 years. And these tools are embedded in every single workflow across the industry. The root cause for Synaps here is this. Synaps has built a genuinely powerful concept and presentation tool, but some of the marketing has been around it being a replacement product. Because the architects that will most likely benefit from Synaps hear AutoCAD killer and start calculating the cost of switching. And for an industry that is so stubborn, it's very hard to switch. Because the next battle in architecture software is not really about who builds the best tool. It is who makes the most powerful tool feel safe enough to use. This is what I would do if I was leading Synaps' growth strategy. I believe their biggest growth point is positioning. Because the short-term move that I would make would be to stop competing with AutoCAD and instead to be working alongside it. Because my strategic shift would be to position Synaps as an AI acceleration layer that sits inside workflows that architects already trust, not instead of it. Because the position changes from replacing AutoCAD to making your workflows faster. And that may sound like a small distinction, but I assure you it's not. Because it lowers the barriers to entry of using Synaps to almost zero. Because they'll use Synaps to get from client brief to presentable concept, where they then have the option to export into AutoCAD or Revit, where the technical production begins. This allows for Synaps to become useful before it becomes essential. Because when you have repeated usefulness, that is how adoption compounds in a slow-moving industry. And once that positioning is clear, you build that proof publicly. And that's not just through product demos, that's through workflow proofs. Whether that be side-by-side screen recordings of a real architecture team, going from brief to client presentations in Synaps versus the same process in traditional tools, and a documented workflow in how to export into the traditional tools. Because in architecture, compatibility is not a feature, it is a buying decision. Then you can go to universities for a long-term vision. Because architecture students right now are using Revit and AutoCAD because that is the industry standard. If Synaps offers free educational licensing and gets the tool in front of students in these universities across Europe and the Balkans, it creates something no press coverage can buy. Because this allows for the next generation of architects to see Synaps as a default and bring that into the industry. The compounding argument is this. Integration earns trust, and trust earns professional adoption. And that professional adoption earns a right to replace more of the workflow over time. Because it's a huge ask for architects to jump from the old world into a new world overnight. But the success can come from building a bridge that connects each one of them together over time. Because the next battle in architecture is not who can build the most powerful tool. It is who makes the most powerful tool feel safe enough to actually use. The bigger lesson that we can learn from Synaps is this. Architecture is one of the oldest professional disciplines in the world. And it survived every wave of technology. From drawing boards to CAD, from desktop to cloud. It has constantly absorbed new tools, but on its own timeline, not the technology's timeline. And that's not a weakness, because that's what professional accountability looks like. And 3 Albanian founders in Vienna understood something real enough to build for it. They've done the technical work, they have the product, and have raised funds, whilst also launching in Tirana in front of many architects and a head of state that knows about design and architecture, and were able to present themselves in the startup world of Silicon Valley and raise over $3.6 million in pre-seed funding. And this shows the level of expertise and knowledge that Albanians have here and in the diaspora. And Synaps is a great example for the Albanian startup ecosystem world on what we're building. If you found this video interesting, please leave a like and comment which company I should do next. I break down Albanian and diaspora businesses every week on this channel, so please do subscribe.